Hey everyone, Dr. Frunky here with a badass knife consult for you today on the Microtech Combat Troodon. If you go back on my channel, you'll see that I had a Combat Troodon some months ago. I made a video calling it the coolest knife in the world. And that one was the Boba Fett slash bounty hunter version of the Combat Troodon. What I eventually found out about that knife was that it was a little bit gimmicky. It was very difficult to carry, namely because the skull crusher on the back had some serious spikes on it. It was called the DNA extractor, and it was nearly impossible to reach for it in the pocket without extracting your own DNA. What I did find is that I loved the size, I appreciated the quality of it, and so I was excited when I saw them releasing some new models of the Combat Troodon to try one of these out. Another reason that I picked this knife up was John Wick. If you guys are familiar with the John Wick movies, you'll know that he has, in the first movie, a Microtech Ultratech, and then in the second movie, he gets one of these, the Combat Troodon, and he uses it to great effect in that movie. If you haven't seen John Wick 1 and 2, I recommend going to watch them. Basically, you will feel like a badass afterwards, and then when you buy one of these, you will basically feel like John Wick. And that was the whole purpose that I bought this knife. I watched both of those movies back to back, and I was like, God, I need to have one of those knives again. And so I picked it up. There's absolutely no shame in me saying that. So it comes in this awesome Microtech box. I will say that Microtech has some very good presentation, generally the very simple how to manage your stuff and some foam insert right here. So standard box that this comes in. So let's go ahead and take a look at this guy and see what we're working with. This is the double-edged, all DLC tactical version of the Combat Troodon. They have different variants. Some of them have G10 tops. Some of them have carbon fiber tops. Some of them fall into the custom category. This is the production category, as denoted by this large logo and the rather plain finishes. Some of them come with Damascus blades. So there are very many different variants of this knife to take a look at. This was the one that I wanted, the all-black DLC, because I wanted it to have that stealthy look. So this is the largest of the dual action knives that Microtech makes. It used to be the Ultratech. Now it's this guy, the Combat Troodon, because this is coming in with essentially a 3.75-inch blade overall. You're getting about 3.6 inches of overall cutting length. Your overall length out to the tip of that glass breaker is almost 9.5 inches. It's about 9.1 of overall without it. The handle is coming in at about 5.1 inches in overall size right there. Let's take a look at some of these other metrics. The blade at its widest point is coming in at a rather slim 0.126, so very slim blade. And the handle is coming in at 0.56 inches, so just over half an inch in overall size. Now, how much does this automatic out the front knife weigh with all this on it? 5.5 ounces. So it's not the lightest knife in the world, but it's rather light considering everything that's going on the inside. Let's pull out another couple of knives for a size comparison. Here is a Spyderco Para 3 and a Spyderco Paramilitary 2. So you can see that this knife is considerably larger than either of those knives. I'll go ahead and bring out another larger knife. This is a Koenig Knives Arius right here. So you can see you need to know what you're getting into when you pick up this Combat Troodon. It's a large, imposing out the front knife. So let's go ahead and see about this knife and break it down anatomically to see what makes it so imposing. Up front is this dual edge blade of M390 steel. You can see that it's denoted M390 there on the bottom. At the choil, I wanted to get the dual edge this time. Last time I had the Hellhound Tanto grind. This comes in a series of different grinds. There's a dagger grind, there's the Hellhound grind, there's a bunch of different ones, a Tanto, various different options, so pick your favorite one. But I felt that the out the front knife is maximized by the dual edge blade right here. You can see that it's denoted DE right there for dual edge, because I wanted to experience what it's like to be able to cut both ways. And to be honest, I have used this for the last couple of days, and I have really enjoyed having that functionality. The stabbing ability is excellent on this knife, and the cutting ability is actually quite great. It's a thin blade stock, and it's ground very well, and every single Microtech I've ever gotten has come terrifyingly sharp, so I have no complaints there. what I've noticed is that the blade is actually quite functional. This is sort of a gimmicky style of knife, but if you actually want to use it, it will function for you. There is a hint of that blade play. I'm going to just jiggle it, but it's so subtle on this knife that it's almost a non-event. You can kind of hear a little bit of it when I initially push down, but you don't actually feel it in the blade. You hear it, but there's not a lot of motion in the blade. That is just something to be aware of. All out the fronts, except for the Hawk Deadlock, have a little bit of that wiggle to it, but this one has the least of all of them. This has less than the UTX or the Ultratech series. So there is no real pivot on this knife. This is unlike other folding knives, so we can talk about the deployment mechanism. It is an out the front mechanism with this slider button. It requires an immense amount of force. You have to slide this thing up, probably putting about 10 pounds of pressure at least, and then it gets to this point, and then you have to push it farther, and then it's there, and then you have to push it even farther, and then the blade fires out. So it is a very safe thing. And then retraction is the same. You have to pull it all the way to this point, and then all the way back. And so it's almost impossible that this knife would fire in the pocket, because you can do this all day, and it's not going to go anywhere. You have to apply a concerted, focused, and constant force to allow that knife to fire out. And when it does fire out, as you can see, it's absolutely badass. This is 100% of the fun of these knives, and that is launching that thing out of the front. Now, some people talk about how launching a knife out of the front can be dangerous for stabbing things, and I will say this Combat Troodon, I'm going to pull out a little sheet of some magazine paper, actually does have some piercing ability. So if I go ahead and do this and just launch it, it does actually stick through the paper on the other side. I'll do it again here to just show you. So it does actually stab through, but that's just a sheet of paper. Anything thicker than about 1 or 2 sheets of paper is going to stop this thing. At the very most, you might get a small nick from hitting the tip of it, but it certainly won't penetrate deeply into any flesh, so that's not something to worry about. Something I have noticed is that the blade tip comes alarmingly close to the edge there. It's almost as if there's a micron of blade sticking up out of the top. You actually can feel it ever so slightly right there. And so it's something that I'm going to have to see if that ever becomes an issue. I've actually dragged this across the surface and it doesn't scrape anything, so I do think that it's actually flush fit in there down to the very, very tiniest millimeter of quality right there, so very impressive. But that is something I'm going to watch to see if that cuts anything accidentally while the knife is closed. Moving back to the handle, this thing runs on the traditional Microtech aluminum chassis. I would like to see them upgrade to titanium, but I understand it would probably jack the price up. Speaking of price, this knife cost $480. $480 for aluminum handles and M390 steel. Now, that is not by any means a bargain at all. This is an expensive knife for what you're getting materials-wise, but what you are getting is a made-in-America, high-quality out the front that can be used in almost any situation. Is this thing tough? Yes. Go and take a look at the Blade HQ Microtech Ultratech field test from a few years ago, and it's quite impressive how solid these knives truly are. I have carried and used this knife and found it to be quite sturdy and quite reliable as an EDC knife. One thing that helps tremendously is this very deep carry clip. This knife entirely disappears into the pocket, save for that little nub, and it almost looks like a pen is sticking up out of the pocket. Riding very low keeps this thing very subtle, and it allows you to pull it out discreetly and use it if you need to. This knife really has a singular purpose in my mind, and that is a tactical use. You can EDC this knife, but I honestly bought this as almost a home defense type of situation. This thing parks right next to my handgun, right next to my bed. So even though I am not trained in any way in using a knife, and I do not recommend using a knife as a weapon in any way, I felt like this knife would fall into that category very well. I think that the stabbing action would work beautifully, and it would probably function very well in a high-intensity situation where I would just need to deploy the knife and leave it deployed. So I think that this knife is pretty badass. I'm looking forward to carrying this and getting a final diagnosis on an actual user. Microtech Combat Troodon right here. So let me know what you guys think of this knife down below in the comments. Go and check out the John Wick movies because they're so badass, and you'll understand immediately why I needed to have this knife after watching them. Leave some comments down below, and I look forward to bringing you a final diagnosis on this, you guys. Go ahead and head over to Instagram and follow me as Dr. Frunky. Click like and subscribe to my YouTube channel, and take care.